Excuse me, please use microphone.
Okay, since this is the coldest day since I arrived here, I was thinking to start in the traditional way as Japanese will start their business day, and that's with an exercise. So you will all have to stand up and we'll have to do some exercise. I guess this was something different. But this is basically the way the Japanese companies, pretty much no matter where they are, they start in the same way. Very early in the morning, they start with those exercises. And that gives you more energy and you are pretty much more ready to start your business day. Okay, today is, I hope, going to be a very interesting presentation because it's going to be about culture. And if this works, maybe it will, maybe it won't. We'll find out. Okay. Okay. So how many of you recognize this little creature? No, it's not cockroach. It's a grasshopper. Have you ever seen the movie The Last Chinese Emperor? Well, that movie pretty much starts with that little guy who was the last selected Chinese emperor, and he's holding this precious grasshopper, and that's his pet. Check it in Russian. What is the term for grasshopper, so that we all know what we are talking about? Okay, let it be. Okay, so the point why I wanted to start with this one is really that we have the same little creature. And based on the culture, that creature in the United States is pest, as you Alina saying, it's like a cockroach, so it's a pest, it has to be killed. In China, it's a pet, it's a very precious pet. And then in northern Thailand is appetizer. So I guess if we will be showing the same symbol in the many different cultures, the effect, let's say if we're talking about advertisement, is going to be very, very different. There was one search engine that actually happened before Google, and their advertisement was the following. There was a little black dog, and the person will give the dog a question, like you're doing Google search, tell me what is this, and then the little dog was going all around the city, the world, and all of that, and coming back with an answer. The whole point of that was, okay, dog in some cultures is regarded as your best friend. So, and as such, he's going or she's going to help you find that answer. However, when they basically showed that ad in South Korea, it was a devastating result. Why do you think it was devastating in South Korea to show the dog as an intelligent creature that is going to help and all of that? How do they regard dogs? What do they use? What do they do with dogs in South Korea? They eat dogs, exactly. So these two really, really short examples are, I hope, going to tell you how important it is really to understand different cultures, and definitely then the same message cannot be easily translated all over the world. Cross-cultural literacy is something that we are all looking to expand and to excel if we are talking about international business. And that basically means, how do you understand different cultures and what do you need to do in order to be actually more efficient, more successful when you're operating in different countries. And obviously, different cultures are going to affect how do you do businesses. Maybe multinational corporations are going to have less problems if, let's say, Russia is investing in Kazakhstan versus Russia is investing in China. Because maybe the Kazakh culture, simply because of the recent history, was more known to Russia than its maybe Chinese culture. And I'm going to start with this because I found this video that starts with Russian, and you will tell me if it is true or not true or anything that comes to your mind. So let's start with that one. Okay, so how truthful was this representation of Russia that you make others wait for you to show for the meeting? You haven't been in the meetings, I guess. Okay, but the thing that they were showing about Saudi Arabia, for example, that's also very important if you travel to India. I have a lot of my students from the United States, and they're actually left-handed. And I was telling them when we are going to go for official, lunches and dinners and all of that, never to use anything with their left hand, like bread or anything else, because it's regarded, as they said, that's the dirty hand. So you don't do anything with that particular hand. And as far as Japan, when you're accepting their business card, first you have to hand it with both hands. But also it's very insulting if you will put their business card in the back of your pants. It has to be really properly put in front of you so that you will show the respect. So those are all little things, but If we start with little things on a bad footing, maybe it will be more difficult to continue with a successful negotiation if you want. Do you maybe happen to know any uniqueness or any interesting things about any culture, or for that matter, Russian culture, that you would like to share, and that would be important, let's say, for foreigners to know about Russian culture and customs, not to do if they want to be successful in Russia? Anybody knows anything? Or when you were traveling abroad in some other parts of the world, what was that thing that they were doing so different that you were not quite there understanding them? Of course. Okay, go ahead. Be brave.
Please don't come late to the meeting. It's not good in Russia.
So Russians can be late, but the others cannot be. Okay. Okay, now what is culture? In any field of science and in any field of research, in any field of writing, academic writing, it's really very important to start with definitions. Why? Because we can talk about same terms, but we may actually have different definitions for the same terms. So for the purpose of tonight's presentation, this is what I will be using as a cultural definition. This is not the only one, but this is what I will be using. So culture is a system of values and norms that are shared among a group of people, and that when taken together constitute a design for living. So we are talking about values, we are talking about norms, and we are talking about society. So now let's see how all of that works together. What do you think about this? Russia is a nation state. Does Russia have one culture? Okay, so how many cultures do Russia have? Give me a few examples of Russian culture, of different cultures in Russia. Okay, you said no, so.
I don't know how to pronounce it in English, but also we have Tatarstan Republic, and there is a really different culture. Or for example, little north ethnicities in north part of Russia, so they have extremely different culture in comparison with common Russian, I think.
Think about culture in Sochi and culture in Tyumen.
You mean all the Russian culture and culture in Tyumen? Sochi. I don't think that this is really different. So I didn't live in Sochi, but I was born in Sochi, so I can bring some examples.
I guess there are a lot of differences between Sochi and Tyumen because, first of all, geographical state, like Sochi is in the coast, and some traditions are really shared from not shared but taken from other ethnicities by the sea, and Tyumen is like one of the first cities in Siberia, and it was like city of colonizators, maybe, and it's just a common Russian culture as we have in like neighborhood districts, and Sochi is like a different situation because first of all because of the sea, and also because of close connection between Sochi and National Republic, which is in Caucasus, like a lot of republics near them, and there are a lot of representatives of these nations in Sochi as well. I live in
Climate plays a big deal in differences here as well.
What do you think about culture differences in cultures? Oh, actually, it's a difficult question for me because I have experienced only regions that were very similar for human,
like Moscow and St. Petersburg, like Petersburg. But I think if we will talk about some sub republics, like Chechnya, we can talk about some differences. For example, in Chechnya, uh, woman doesn't work without hijab in government structure. And I have a couple of words about nation state or state nation. In constitution, Russia declared like more like state nation. But if you see on politics, it's more like in policy of government. It looks like that they want that Russia will be nation state. So it's more my opinion, I think.
Your opinion. The whole point here is like sometimes we can be confused. For example, I live in the United States. Some people are thinking, "Oh, United States, there is one culture." I mean, there are so many cultures in United States, based state by state, and then inside the state, and then inside a particular city, and then all of that. I mean, New York City probably has more in common with some other parts of the world than it has, let's say, with the city in Utah. So it's very important to make that distinction between between the whole country and between the culture. Very often, the neighboring states and the people living in neighboring states, like border states, will have much more in common because they have a similar population than they will have with maybe the cities that are far away from that one. Those are some of the components that are going to influence the culture. So we definitely, you mentioned in Chechnya, we have definitely the role of religion. Also, we have a political philosophy, economic philosophy, education, language, and social structure. So in order for us to talk about culture, to understand the culture and cultural norms, we actually have to take into consideration all those variables. When we talk about social structure, many things, come to someone's mind when we talk about social structure. But for example, what do you think? Are we representing one social structure tonight? This group of people here. Yes, no? Okay, why yes? Mhm, 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 mhm. Okay. Yeah, and plus, you are students, and I'm here a professor, and we are here all talking about international business. So we do have something actually in common. Um, how many of you know what the caste system is? Yes, in India. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So who wants to explain what the caste system in India is?
Okay, there are few, I guess, less than 10 castes in India, and there are some castes which is really rich, and some of them are really poor, and some poor caste even has no right, or better say, less right than other castes. Like, I don't know how to pronounce it in English, but неприкасаемые is the yeah, of course, untouchable. I guess is the lowest caste in India, and they have totally no, almost no rights, and it's like it's for me it's a bad example of social stratification because it's not about about our regards, but about in which family we was born.
Absolutely.
It's important that you can change your caste, and also Indian believes that if you uh, yeah, yeah, thank you.
The thing with the thing with caste is really interesting because officially, legally, castes are abolished in India when India gained independence from United Kingdom. But as you can see by you saying, I know about caste and this is how it works and all of that, it seems that the caste system, despite the fact that officially it has been abolished, deleted, it still exists. Let me give you one example. When I was in India and there was a guy who was talking about transformation in India and all the sorts of things, and he was actually belonging to that top caste, the most privileged caste, Brahmins. And he was talking that there are actually nowadays, which caste you were born in previously doesn't necessarily mean that you, if you're born in Brahmin caste, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are rich. It used to be the case, but then not any longer. So what can happen is that you can be born in that Brahmin caste, but you are really, if you are not working, if you're not contributing to the society, if you're not making your living, you're really not rich. However, based on their constitution, after they gain independence, what they have done, they basically said because they want to make this untouchable caste prosperous, so they have provided free education for people who belong to that caste. So I was when that person was talking about I asked him, well, why can't somebody leaves this city and goes to another city, and then maybe you change the name, and then you can actually go to school for free. And the guy almost collapsed because he said, no, I would never change my caste, despite the fact that I'm poor. And that's how important that association with the caste system was. What is your name? Julia. Julia mentioned something very important, and that's also it's related to religion, and it's also related to that understanding of different cultures, and that you belong. They believe in reincarnation, that you can be born in the next life in a different way and shape and form. So that's actually also very important. And it's very important. Why? Because if you are a multinational corporation and you're going to employ employees for different positions, what do you think? How successful is going to be if you are, let's say, an American company and you're in India and you are employing for the manager's position, supervisor's position, somebody that belongs to the untouchables caste. And the people who will be working for that person are actually Brahmin caste. Is that going to work? Of course, it's not going to work because of those historical, cultural prejudices, if you want, and realities. So it's very, very important. You remember last time when I said it's very important to have an HR director to be the local person, because that person is more going to understand local culture and what is to do and what is not to do. Those are religions, some of the main religions in the world, and Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Confucianism. And obviously, each of those religions have their beliefs. And on the top of religion, we also can talk about ethics. And I think we did talk about ethics last week. And particularly, we did talk about ethics in the class on last Friday, I think. But again, very important to understand what are the values of particular religions and to be aware of all of that. Now, it was interesting when I asked you to translate grasshopper, and actually you came with two different words in Russian. So you can just imagine how complicated the world of international business is when people start communicating in English and the other side is talking in Mandarin, and then you have a person who is translated all of that. I mean, it can be a lot of confusions. Basically, what do you think in Russia? What is more important, verbal communication or non-verbal communication? Are you all familiar with what non-verbal communication is? So in general, verbal is what I'm doing now, but unverbal will be I'm using my hands, I'm doing this, I'm turning my back, and all of those sorts of things. So in Russia, when you are talking, what do you think? What do you pay attention to? Verbal communication or non-verbal communication, or both? Or give me an example when and how does that work?
While in Russia, it is not really necessary. And if we want to look at different speakers from all over Russia, the art of public speech is really poor. So all the things that you have described just now, they are actually possible and really come eye contact. Well, yeah, sure, but I think that in Russia there's no like a huge culture of like gestures and non-verbal communication like in, I don't know, Japan, for example, because there's like huge culture of it, and Russia is just none.
It's more verbal. So it's more verbal. It's interesting that you mentioned Italy. When I was working in one university, and there was a colleague of mine, and she was actually from Italy, and she came to see me, and we started talking. And I told her, like, let's talk. And she said, no, I cannot talk. I said, why can't you talk? And she said, because I have a pile of books in my hands. So in Italy, it's not verbal. It's really, you have to talk, you have to move. It's everything involved. So it was really, really interesting. Yes.
I'm just extremely disagree with the previous speaker because I think that non-verbal communication is really important in Russia because I think that we maybe we don't recognize it, we don't think about it, but we also pay attention how people talk, how they behave with us, and also with some class of our society that they can be aggressive towards non-confident people, for example.
And actually, psychologically, like about 55% of percentage of important information we read through the body language, and only like more or less from the words, from the speech, and like about 7% from the words itself. So
Okay. Any other thoughts? As you know, in some cultures, for example, in Asian culture, it's not good if you do something like this to another person. I mean, I can do it if I'm older and there is a kid, but everybody else, like if you are the same age, that will be very disrespectful. Also, in some Asian cultures, and not only Asian, it's very offended if you show your sole of your shoes. So even without, as I said, without knowing, you can really be insulting somebody. So it's very, very important to pay attention to that verbal, but also really, and thank you for bringing those numbers to nonverbal communication. Now you're going to see some blunders where actually they were using words, trying to translate them, and it was really, really very miserable translation with a completely different meaning.
Hi guys. It happens so that even world-famous brands make ridiculous mistakes in their titles of their multi-million advertising campaigns. Who knows? Maybe they do that on purpose. Anyway, in today's episode you will learn about 10 most bizarre and funny mistakes in branding history. There was this one time when Pepsi goofed it up on both German and Chinese markets. Their main slogan, "Come alive, you're in the Pepsi generation," was very badly misinterpreted. The German version was quite funny and very reassuring. It urged people to rise from the grave together with Pepsi. Germans laughed at it and didn't seem to mind, but in case of Chinese consumers, it was more like scary than funny. It went like, "Pepsi will get your parents from the grave." American Airlines wanted more customers so badly, they decided to change their regular seats to leather ones. However, in Mexico, their campaign failed because of their silly slogan, "Fly in leather." In Spanish, "fly in leather" sounds like "vuela en cuero" and means "fly naked." Hey, why the hell not? Gerber decided they should supply Central Africa with their baby food products. Their corporate identity is the smiling baby face they feature on all their products. The popular majority of Central Africa can't read, and that's why they always put condoms on the cover of the product. So, Gerber markers failed to take into account that a child's face would seem weird, better yet, creepy. I can only imagine people's faces when they were offered that cannibal baby food. Chevrolet Nova. Looks good, isn't it? Unfortunately, this beauty wasn't in demand in Spanish-speaking countries. And if Google is right, that's 23 countries. All because of its name. The thing is, in Spanish, Nova means not going. Get it? Not going? Who the hell would want to buy a car with a name like that? I wouldn't. And another big fail concerns Mazda and its car La Puta. I guess many of you already know what's the story there. Anyway, La Puta in Spanish means, well, that's what they call prostitutes. So I guess a lot of people found it to be a good enough reason not to buy La Puta. In 2009, Russian leading gas company Gazprom merged with Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, so they gave their joint venture a rather controversial name, Niggas. Niggas, as you already guessed, was the abbreviation of Nigeria and Gazprom. Quite a few people were shocked and outraged from what seemed to be more suitable for a Snoop Dogg's music video. As for me, I say let niggas be niggas. After a launching campaign in Asia, Coca-Cola noticed that their slogan sounds a bit weird in a few Chinese dialects. They came up with things like "bite the tadpole" and "wax horse." After a while, they changed their slogan to something like "the happiness in your mouth." And it goes like this.
可口可乐
There is a car called Chevrolet Aveo, and you can find one of these only in Russian-speaking countries. In the rest of the world, it's called Deu Kalos. Long story short, Kalos in Russian means shit. In the 1980s, some really weird diet candies appeared. Those were called AIDS. 1 year later, a first case of AIDS was detected. Although it spells a bit differently, it is pronounced the same. AIDS will help you lose weight, which is true in a way. Oh god. World-famous brand Bacardi also had problems with their squash called Pavia. They failed to take into account that what in French means chic and style, and many other languages translate simply as baboon. Alright, that's all for now, guys. I'm really glad that you watched this video till the end. If you know anything about interest.
Okay, I guess this was interesting. There is also one other thing I remember when one very famous company that is producing very expensive pens, they were advertising for Spanish-speaking in the Spanish-speaking countries, and they wanted to say, like if you're a man and you put a pen in your like white shirt, it's not going to embarrass you because it's not going to leak. Well, they translated in Spanish that by nota embarazada. And if you know something about Spanish, that means you're not going to get pregnant. So quite a different meaning altogether. And so that's why, as I wanted to point it out, it's really, really important to understand and to check and double check and, what are you really translating and does it make sense in that culture or doesn't? Now, education. This is where I would like you to use your smartphones and find out 5 or 10 or 15 countries, whichever you find out, that have the highest percentage of people per capita of educated people with college education. So you have your phones. Use them now so you don't chat, but you really do some kind of search and find out what are those countries with the highest percentage of population with a higher education.
So the most educated country is Canada, 56%. Then Japan, 50%. Then Israel, Korea, United Kingdom, United States, Australia, Finland, Norway, and Luxembourg. It's not there. It's not in top 10. CNBC.
Did anyone else found Russia on that list? Anybody? Well, Russia is really scoring higher. I mean, there are different lists. That one is obviously important as well. But the whole point that I want to stress over here, when you see that you have more educated people in that particular country, do you think that there will be better chances for you to communicate with that country, or will you have more easier way to find the qualified people that will work for your multinational corporation? I guess the answer is yes. It's a very, very simple answer. So obviously, when you have more educated people, most likely they have higher skills and education. And in quite a number of cases, they also will speak a foreign language as well. Well, that is also the case, but again, you're really right in a sense. If you're looking for unskilled labor, definitely then you can pay them less. Yeah, there is a valid point there. Thank you. Now, how many of you heard about this name? I think all of you who were in the class on last Friday, should know about Hofstede something. But for all of you who were not in the class, but you are really interested in taking and learning more about this particular topic, this name is actually very, very important, and you will find a lot of sources, a lot of articles written about this person, about this the way how he's actually observing cultures. Initially, he started with those characteristics. He said, we can actually look at the cultures from power distance, individualism versus collectivism, uncertainty avoidance, and masculinity versus femininity. Okay, so your gut feeling, what is telling you? Is Russia a culture with a more power distance? Let me explain the power distance. In general, power distance means, for example, if you are in a company and how you're going to approach your supervisor. Are you going to approach that person by calling that person first name and saying to that person T or V? V. So it's going to be with more respect. There is going to be some distance. United States in general, it's really, I mean, first, the English language is a little bit different than Russian, obviously. So in English, we don't make a difference between somebody that you are addressing with respect or somebody who you're addressing like a friend or a peer. And so they will be most of the time called by their first name. What do you think about Germany? How will people in a business setting call each other?
As I know, in German language, they have different words to talk people with respect and talk with, with your friends, for example, in a different with the English and Russian also.
Very true. In addition to that, they will also use the title. So they will say, such and such last name, but as an engineer, as a doctor, with a title, not like Jim, Paul, and something like that. As far as the next one, individualism versus collectivism, this is basically the relationship between the individual and his or her fellows. So do you think that Russia is more individualistic country or more collectivistic country? Collectivistic country. Who do you think it's really, really very individualistic country or culture? USA, definitely true. And uncertainty avoidance is actually how do you deal with uncertainty? Do you embrace it, or are you afraid of uncertainty? And the final one is masculinity versus femininity. And let's do this later on. Later on, Hofstede introduced Confucianism, and that's the orientation versus short-term and long-term. What do you think? If you will have to select only one variable that will define the best differences between cultures, which one will you select? What do you think that immediately distinguish different cultures? What characteristic? What behavior? What attitude? Does anything come to your mind?
You can't measure only one and say here is Russia and here is India, because okay, in one case it will work, but in another, if we compare the USA and Russia, it will not work, and our characteristic will be the same in this certain criteria.
You're absolutely right. However, if you will still have to select only one particular characteristic, my take on that will be the concept of time. Can you all see here? Everyone? Okay. In Russia, how do we talk about time? Not being on time. I'm not talking about being on time or being late, but how do we talk about time? Yeah, it is linear. It is very linear. In general, in Western societies, we talk about time as a linear concept. What does that mean? That means we are here in present tonight. Everything that happened before this hour, that is, let's say, 8 o'clock, is past. Everything that is going to happen after this class and tomorrow and on, month from now, it's going to be future. So this concept of time and understanding of time, that you have present, everything before is past, everything in front is future, is actually defining us, how we think about certain things and how we are going to act. Now, you were talking about reincarnation. In Eastern societies, concept of time is not linear. Concept of time is circular. What does that mean? That means present, future, and I guess past all go together. You see, your perception about importance of life, your perception about anything that you do in your life is really defined by the concept of time. Because if we understand the time as linear, that means that if I haven't done it yesterday, I will not be able to do it. If I haven't done it in this life, I wouldn't be able to do it. However, this concept of circular time is really giving us, in a certain way, more freedom, that there is always time for something to happen. And you will see that in most of those cultures, their perception about certain things that need to be done now are a little bit different. So I would just like to point out that particular characteristic, and then maybe that will ignite you to think about that, and maybe if you have a chance to read different philosophers or to read about different histories of those people, you may actually understand them a little bit better. And now what we are going to do is, if you can click on this Hofstede study, and we are going to do a little exercise where you are going to tell me which countries you will like to compare. So we can actually compare three cultures. So tell me which cultures you would like to see, how are they alike or different.
So let's take Russia. And, we saw Albania. Maybe. Okay. Albania and Israel. Israel. Israel.
Okay. So Russia is we had it. No, that's my presentation. We don't want that one. Okay. So let's not move it so we don't lose it, I guess. So Russia is in green, Israel is in purple, and Albania is in blue. So the first one is power distance. Then we have individualism and collectivism. Then we have masculinity versus femininity. And then we have uncertainty and long-term and indulgence. So what can you tell me with which country Russia has more similarities and
if you can see exactly, it's Albania. Maybe because of both countries. Yeah. Yeah. Power. Power distance. Mm.
it's not good spelling. Okay. But I want Russia also, so that we will compare those two countries. So maybe without, let's go just with United States and Russia. Okay. So, okay, now can you just stay with Russia and United States? If you can just delete the other two because it's a little bit too many information, then we may be lost. Okay. So, what can you tell me how similar those two cultures are? Totally different. I guess they're totally different. One of the really big, huge differences is in the power distance and individualism and uncertainty avoidance. I mean, pretty much everything. Yeah, very different. And so we need a little bit more cultural intelligence and cultural education between two countries simply because the cultures are different. However, let me ask you this question. What do you think? Your generation in Russia and American students in United States versus your generation in Russia and your grandparents. Who do you have more similarity with? So your same generation here in Russia and that same generation in United States versus you and your grandparents. Who do you think you have more in common with?
I think that's there. We are something middle between USA students and our grandparents. I think so.
I'm getting here all possible options here. Like we are closer to the students over there, we are closer to our grandparents, and we are somewhere in the middle. But in general, you will see the following that, for example, when companies are thinking about selling products overseas, and they can actually look at one country, let it be in Africa, and that country is quite underdeveloped. and it has a very low gross domestic product per capita. However, it does have a certain number of people, let it be 10%, let it be 5%, that are very, very rich. And they are thinking about exporting to that country luxury products. Do you think that they will find a market for that products, for those products in that particular country or not? They will find a market, and it's what is interesting is when you look actually people belonging to the same, let's say, are they rich or are they poor? Are they young or they are old? Very often you will find more similarities between rich people between different countries than between rich people and poor people in the same country. And particularly your generation and even the younger generation, I think in last few times that we met together, you actually have demonstrated that you have a very strong belief about ecology and environmental protection, and that's really, really also happening among young people in the United States. So there are sometimes more similarities inside different groups, young, rich, than inside the same country between the people belonging to different groups. That is very odd. I'm not there. That's the last slide. I don't want the last slide. Not that yet. No, not yet there. Okay, now after this one, yeah. You can continue. There is another one, and then you can click on that. No. Go back, and then you can click on this globe study. So we have Hofstede that had initially those 4 characteristics of culture. Then he added 2 more, so total of 6. Now I want to show you the next study. This is a little bit more comprehensive study that is also talking about cultures, and it's called Global Culture. And what I want you, there is Russia down. So if you can scroll down, there is Russia down. I actually put it here, the characteristic and cultural visualization of Russian culture. So what do we have here? If you focus here, this line is saying country practice score. Then we have a range. So this is this range. Then we have country value score. Again, and then we have a range of that value. What does that mean? They first ask you in that survey, what do you think? How important is this value for you? So they have those surveys that actually distribute among the people belonging to those cultures, and they ask them, how will you score this particular value of performance orientation? And very often you see that we are thinking that this is very valuable. However, in our practice, we are not showing that it's very valuable. So it's very important to recognize that gap. And that's why you have those 2 measures. So this one is the practice, what is really happening in practice, and this one is what are the values, how much emphasis we think we want to be this. And then if you look average globe score, that means all those countries that are a part of that will be kind of here as far as the practice score. And then you can see performance orientation, assertiveness, future orientation, humane orientation, institutional collectivism, in-group, gender, power, distance, uncertainty. So this is for the culture as a whole. And then if you can just scroll a little bit more. Now we are going to do this one with the leadership characteristics. So I just want to point out to this particular site as well, because you will find a lot of interesting information. And again, going back to all of you who are taking this as a course, please use this one also when you are preparing for your presentation with the country that you are going to present. This can be really, really very handy. Very interesting to learn about different countries in this way and cultures. secrets of cross-cultural communication. We were talking about this verbal and non-verbal communication. And this actually very short video is going to show you how important is saving the face concept in Asian cultures. In general, saving the face, like Americans are often known as very, very direct. They will immediately tell you, and you can tell it either by verbal or non-verbal communication, that they like you, not like you, this is going to work, this is not going to work. However, and they will very bluntly say, you need to improve this, and then after that you cry and, but who cares? But here, if you will be that direct with Asians, it can be really, really devastating. So this is a good example how this concept of saving the face works in business setting. So.
In all the exuberance associated with negotiating new business relationships between China and the West, too little attention has been paid to managing conflict in those relationships, and conflict is inevitable. As the story I'm about to tell you illustrates, confronting conflict, by which I mean how do you tell a person there's a problem that needs to be fixed, is handled very differently in the West than it is in East Asia. Jeff, one of my executive education students, told the story of the rattling bicycles. He had a contract with a German buyer for bicycles that he was having manufactured in China. Shortly before the bikes were to be shipped to Germany, Jeff went to the plant to check on them. When he got there, he and the plant manager took a couple of the bikes off the line, rode them around in the countryside, and Jeff's bike rattled. He thought the plant manager's bike rattled too. So when they got back to the plant, Jeff handed over his bike. And then he turned to the plant manager and commented, "I think my bike rattled." And then he went back to Hong Kong. When Jeff ended his story, there was a stunned silence in the room, and then a flurry of questions. "You just went back to Hong Kong? You didn't check all the bikes? You didn't tell the plant manager that the Germans wouldn't accept rattling bikes?" "No," said Jeff. Finally, someone asked, "Well, why not?" And Jeff explained that he knew the plant manager knew why he had come. He was afraid that if he confronted the plant manager directly, the plant manager would lose face. He would feel disrespected and he would feel embarrassed. And in revenge, he might ship the rattling bikes. But Jeff thought if he was respectful, the plant manager would get the job done, fix the bikes, and ship them on time to Germany. Jeff understood the difference between direct and indirect confrontation of conflict. In the West, when we have a conflict, we tend to identify the problem, assign blame, and assign responsibility for the fix, and even tell what we think needs to be done. In East Asia, it's done much more indirectly. There's a signal that there's a problem, and an assumption that the responsible party will take responsibility and fix the problem. So if you're a Western manager working in East Asia, my advice to you is to be aware of subtle signals about problems and conflict. You might hear, for example, the term, "that would be difficult," or when you ask a question, you might get a story back in response, or you might hear a metaphor. It's okay to probe. What was the protagonist in the story thinking about, would you say? Or how's this metaphor interpreted in China? But what you don't want to do is point fingers, because in East Asia, people take roles and responsibilities very, very seriously. If for your peace of mind, you really have to make clear there's a problem that needs to be fixed, state your problem in tentative terms. Don't be definitive. Engage your counterpart in defining the problem and in defining the solution. Now, if you are an East Asian manager working in the West, I advise you be prepared for confrontation. Try not to take it personally. Try not to be defensive. Try not to withdraw. Instead, engage the other party in understanding what the problem is. Don't take the problem to the boss. In East Asia, It's very common to involve the boss very early in the conflict. But in the West, managers are supposed to resolve conflict themselves. So instead, engage your counterpart, work together collaboratively to identify the problem and fix the problem. Just a little bit of cultural sensitivity to direct and indirect confrontation of conflict can really pay off. It did for Jeff. Those German buyers not only accepted the bikes, but they reordered.
So I was thinking that this really short video can demonstrate the importance of this communication and how important is what we say, how we say it, to whom we say it. So now the question for all of you, what do you think? Does culture change? Do you think the Russian culture today is the same culture as it was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 300 years ago? Of course no. So what has changed?
The first thing which was changed is technologies, I guess. And through these technologies, our lifestyle changed also. We have new habits and new ways to find information about the world, and it may change our mind because, for example, 100 years ago we had only newspapers, and that's it, and a fixed number of them. And now we have enormous number of newspaper in the internet, and we can use whichever we want and just know everything, almost everything about the world.
If you look at this particular, feature, you will see that a lot of those things have changed in the meantime.
I just wanted to say that maybe culture can change some traditions also, and religion, as it seems.
Of course, and again, political systems, economic systems have changed as well. So all of those, and education. Think about how many people were educating in Russia 100 years ago, 200 years ago, versus how many are educated now. So obviously, all of this is going to influence the cultural changes as well. I have put it here, actually, two examples of cultural changes. I put here China and then put here India. We already talked about India. India is, actually, those are two oldest leading cultures that we have today in the world, both of them. In the case of China, China used to be a very collectivist society. And the Chinese were living in extended families. So you will see that people were with grandparents and parents and grandchildren or children will be living together. However, with all of these changes and industrialization and economic development of China, a lot has changed there as well. Nowadays, for the first time, even in China, they have actually homes for elderly people. What does that mean? That means that they are not living any longer with their children or grandchildren. They're actually living, like in the United States, in a home for elderly people. So that's a huge, huge cultural change for them. And in India, as we were talking about that caste system and working has changed. In the past, there were a lot, not that is still not the case in some part of India, but most of the time is not the case in the big cities and most developed cities. Arranged marriages with girls that were very, very young. Now you have actually, with that education, with expansion of the market, with industrialization, with internationalization, we have foreign companies that are now in India, as well as local companies, and there are actually females are starting to work. They're not necessarily going to get married very, very young. So that's a huge cultural change that is going to have an effect on future generations as well. Obviously, if we are thinking about doing business internationally, it's very, very important that we learn something about those cultures. And what were we talking about on Tuesday in international economics class? Which theory was explaining which countries will be more involved in trade and foreign direct investments. What did we talk? What did I say? No, I'm asking like which theory explains which countries will be trading with each other, or what the more
the gravity model. So should I explain it? So the developed countries are more likely to trade with each other and also with countries that are geographically close. The developing countries will also trade with each other, and the countries from the third world also will trade with each other over cultures. Mostly, yes, yeah.
Exactly, culture also influence to the terms of international trading and why specific states trade with each other, like Russia and Ukraine maybe.
Yes. So that is that term that we want to use. The gravity model will explain, and also there are different factors that are influencing trade and international relations between countries. And obviously, if the countries are closer to each other, think about United States and Mexico, United States and Canada. They're actually each other's main trading partners. Not because of the size of the countries, but pretty much because of the proximity of the country. Also, the countries with the less cultural differences will be more connected in international trade, in international foreign direct investments, and as well as the level of economic development. When we talk about culture, it is really, really important. Like with everything else, when we have a problem, it's important to recognize that we have a problem. Because avoiding to recognize that we have a problem, closing our eyes, is really not going to make us resolve the particular issue. So when we are dealing with different cultures, please be sure to recognize that there are differences between cultures. And we have seen in the Hofstede model how different US culture is versus Russian culture. So that has to be recognized. By the same token, we then have actually to try to learn about those differences. What is really, really the most important part is showing the respect. Showing the respect to each other, showing the respect for our differences. Very, very important in order to actually start building trust. Because without trust, we don't have negotiations. Negotiations are not going to be successful. And then finally, we have to look how we are going to reconcile our differences. We definitely, when we are negotiating with somebody, with another different party, we obviously have an interest. We have a common goal. Somebody wants to sell something, somebody wants to buy something, somebody wants to invest, somebody wants to, sell. So all of those things through this process are really going to get us to the successful negotiation. But I will definitely recognize this one as respect. The most important. Nobody can know everything about every single culture in the world, but if you show interest and if you actually show respect, everybody's going to recognize that. There was actually one really, really great poet in the United States. Her name was Maya Angelou. and she's African American, and it was really, really very interesting when she was invited in Africa to one of those traditional actually dinners that were prepared for her, and she was coming there, and everybody was waiting for her because she was a guest of honor, and she was very, very surprised that there was a huge, beautiful, actually carpet, but nobody was, on that carpet. Nobody was standing on that carpet. Everybody was standing around the carpet. And she was like, are they afraid to stand on the carpet? And then she pretty much stood on that carpet. The moment she did that, there was a staff who came immediately, rolled that carpet, took it out, brought another carpet. Well, the carpet was a place where they're all going to eat. It was like a table. It wasn't, carpet in our societies, maybe, you walk, it's warm and all of that. In that society, it was actually a place where they're going to eat. So she said, I remember when she was talking about that, she said, oh my God, I was so embarrassed. But again, we cannot know every single detail, but showing respect, it's really going to open many doors for everybody. And these are a few last slides that I have prepared for tonight. Cultural intelligence. You probably all heard about, how intelligent you are, and there are all those different things that you are going to measure your IQ. There is another term that is also very important and very powerful. It's emotional intelligence. However, tonight, I'm introducing this cultural intelligence, and then tomorrow, for all of you who are taking this class, I would like you all to do this one. We'll do it in the class. But what is cultural intelligence? This guy, Daniel Goleman, basically said a propensity to suspend judgment, to think before acting. In a sense, don't rush into reaction. Don't rush with your answer. Think about it. If you are in a new setting, in a new culture, don't think that you are the most intelligent person in the world that knows everything. Like, think and pause. Look around. What are they doing? And these are the characteristics of that cultural intelligence. So this one is metacognitive. Basically what it says, one thing is to have cognitive, to know, to learn about different cultures. So that's one. That's where we start with, in order for us to learn about different cultures. However, one thing is learning. Another thing is really applying that in a real setting. Then we have actually, do we have motivation? Are we motivated to learn about different cultures and different people? And then finally, how are we using? Are we using the right terminology? Are we using a tone or body language? All of those things are components of this cultural intelligence. And then these are some sites that are available so that you can basically do it for yourself and find out what is your cultural intelligence IQ. And then to end, I want to show you this really, really funny cultural ads, and that will be for tonight then.
In some Asian cities, it's considered acceptable for a commuter to fall asleep on the shoulder of a stranger. In New York, it's quite a different story. Of course, you could always adapt. we're the global bank that never underestimates the importance of local knowledge. HSBC, the world's local bank.
The English believe it's a slur on your host's food if you don't clear your plate. Whereas the Chinese feel you're questioning their generosity if you do. At HSBC, we never underestimate the importance of local knowledge. Which is why we have local banks staffed by local people in over 80 countries across the globe. HSBC, the world's local bank.
In America, if you hit a hole-in-one, you're expected to buy everyone a drink. However, in Japan, it's traditional to buy your playing partners expensive gifts.
Same hole.
At HSBC, we never underestimate the importance of local knowledge. HSBC, the world's local bank.
Okay, with those three really short stories, I would like to end and thank you for coming tonight. And then we see each other tomorrow for all of you who are taking the class. Did you all sign your names who need to get that certificate? Please do that and then